great to see you again. I guess it's been a couple months. It feels like it's been a lot longer because so much has happened. It's been probably 6 months since we last chatted, but I'm super excited to have you on the show and to hear you a little bit more about what you guys are building at Speakeasy and some of the new MCP products. I think folks are really excited about the space right now. So excited to be chatting with you. And I always love chatting with builders and people building the future. So it's great to see you.
Thanks for having me, Nina. It has indeed been a busy few months since we last met. I think we met right around when Speakeasy was doing its Series A at the end of last year. And then, it's been a wild time for company growth, but also, as you said, the ecosystem, MCP has landed and has kind of shaken our world. So, I'm glad we're chatting.
Cool. I mean, do you want to do a quick elevator pitch? What is Speakeasy?
Yeah.
Why do you guys decide to build it?
Totally. So Speakeasy is your modern API toolchain. Our job is to help you build, design, and distribute really amazing APIs. And thanks to Agentic Tools, we also help you consume those APIs now. And so as a product company, as someone building APIs internally or externally, what Speakeasy can do for you is help you go from your source of truth, your API spec, to all of the things you need to service your customer base. So this could be really high quality SDKs and documentation for great developer experience, and then a really high quality MCP server for agentic experience. And so that's what we do. And as a result of that, a lot of the companies we work with have been wanting more and more agentic tools, not just a single MCP server for their API, but agentic tools for all the APIs they use. And so we are working towards really building out a complete AI tools platform. And the end goal there is that we really want to unlock AI engineering. For those of us who have tried building agents and AI applications, a lot of the data and useful services that agents need to access are kind of locked away behind internal APIs, third-party APIs. And so making it easy for agents to actually integrate and access APIs and data is a big problem if you want to build AI that's actually useful, right? That can actually take real action on your behalf. And so Speakeasy can be that AI tools layer for you. So that's what we do.
Yep, I love that. And maybe you can walk through actually the founding story, how you guys ended up getting started, because I think it's actually a really interesting one with the HackerNews post and where you guys started to where you guys are now.
Totally, yeah. My co-founder Simon and I, we have a background in API development. I worked on APIs at a number of enterprise companies, most recently before Speakeasy, a company called LiveRamp, which is a big ad tech platform, it's a public company now, amazing machinery in terms of what they do, using APIs to both collect pseudonymous customer data, distribute that to every platform out there. That led me down to API platforms and why companies need an API practice and API tools. So that's kind of my background. When we got started, we were actually building out what I would call an API self-service portal. The companies who wanted that Stripe style self-service experience, we were giving it to them in a box. And one day we just decided, hey, one of the parts of Stripe's great experience is a really nice SDK. So let's just put up a free to use SDK generator. I think it was during the Web3 era, so we called it easysdk.xyz, and then threw it up on HackerNews. Yeah, it's so gone now, right? But yeah, I put it on HackerNews, just kind of took off. People were excited making SDKs. The idea was you could get to a much higher quality SDK than what you get from kind of some of the older open source generators. And yeah, that led us to really building out a whole developer experience platform for your API. That's now expanded to agentic experience and going even further to really doing live tool calls, function calling. There's so much we want to do there.
Yep, love it. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about MCP and what you guys are doing there. That would be actually really fun to go into, only because I think that one of the biggest use cases actually for MCP to start off is on AI coding, because the clients that folks are using primarily for MCP servers are Cursors, Windsurf. It is the AI first development IDEs.
I think the really interesting thing that I have found as a developer working in these platforms is having an SDK against an API you're coding against. Cursor, all the assists work way better when there is an SDK, especially one that comes with static markdown documentation that can be scraped. That is, if you have an LMTXT built into that, even better. And suddenly it goes from, I find the accuracy heuristically somewhere from 50% to 90%, right? Suddenly the AI is not worried about constructing accurate HTTP calls and with the right data that needs to be passed in and out, you can really direct it to do some of the more creative stuff. That core boilerplate, it will always get it right as a result. That's like, I think, the day zero value. From there, the journey gets really interesting because with MCP, of course, you can get that real live interaction, chat interaction with the API in the IDE. But what we've been seeing too is people are making MCPs not just for the API, but for their docs. Like an MCP that just understands how to parse your documentation. So you never have to leave your IDE to go to like docs.company.com, right? You can just access those docs in IDE just through questions. That's even more exciting because it's not just about like integration. It's really the whole onboarding journey, the whole like customer support journey can be in the IDE. And yeah, so that's really exciting.
Yep. I think it's really interesting because the stuff that maybe folks would have built originally a command line tool for, like a CLI tool, actually all of that they're basically shoving into the MCP now, which is, I think, super fascinating. And like, I've been building actually I've been vibe coding some stuff. And one thing that I find super interesting is like the thing that's actually the slowest right now is I'm going to the Supabase portal. I'm like clicking around, it's all the human things. I'm going to the Apple developer portal, clicking around.
Yeah.
And so actually, if you can start surfacing some of that behavior, which I guess like that was functionality that you would have put in a CLI tool, but maybe now you're pushing to the MCP server, that can be a huge unlock for reducing the barriers of entry for a developer to use your platform. So I think that's actually a super, super interesting angle. I don't know if you've seen any companies that are doing that really well.
Yeah, totally. I think there was actually a demo in Stripe Sessions yesterday about this, and it's the same one that we use in our sales demo sometimes, which is one of our customers, Vassell. They have an SDK through us, but that SDK also distributes an MCP server. And what that means is if I'm running that MCP server, I can actually interact with Vassell. I can buy domains. I can set up new deployments like that. I can make purchases, right? Which is kind of crazy. Like you can get so far in terms of, as you said, interacting with the vendors and the ClickOps. The ClickOps goes away, or at least it's like 90% gone. There's still, the last mile, which people haven't figured out how to bring into the API, but which is really exciting. I think there's like a world of like agentic commerce here, right? Where as a developer, I'm like vibe coding, and then I want to deploy this thing and I just interact in my ID and I say like, help me choose the best hosting platform, help me get set up. And then I drop in my card details and suddenly I can just push from there. And I'm not even going to someone's portal, setting up an account and all of that. That's like incredibly exciting. And probably good news for the infra vendors.
I don't know if you've seen the Fast MCP library. One thing that they're pushing is this idea of composite MCPs. But that was actually a super fascinating concept. I think one problem with that is maybe like the nesting dolls of security vulnerabilities, because now you have a composite MCP. All of the individual MCPs associated with that might also have vulnerabilities. And MCP already is like not the most, is not the most secure platform that we've seen.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think on that, the like MCP side of, when you think about like multiple packages and composite MCP, what we have found from our testing is that actually the best thing to do is like curate the tools that you want to use and then let the LLM decide what tools to choose. We thought of this too because we do code generation, right? So when we generate the MCP, we were like, why don't we generate like a multi-level MCP, right? There's something that like encodes multiple API calls into a tool. And I think the truth is that with good descriptions and good curation of the tools, the tool discovery that an LM can do is still better than you having to make multi-level MCPs ahead of time. So my 2 cents is it's better to invest in like the metadata that an MCP needs for good tool discovery rather than trying to circumvent tool discovery through composites or through adding multiple layers. Of course, very early here, I could be totally wrong as this like evolves. I've also started to hear people talk about like models just for tool discovery, models that are optimized to pick tools and then pass that off to a second model that actually does the function calls themselves. So very, very interesting stuff in terms of like tool discovery being a problem to solve. I think there's also a great opportunity on UX here, right? Which is, we've been thinking about this as we build our platform. A lot of MCP experience today is very opaque. It's opaque and the user isn't really in control. If I load up, I use the HubSpot MCP quite often. to just like get data on our CRM, like, what deals are active, what's our deal flow look like. And I can't really, like, I know HubSpot well enough that I should be able to like add a little bit of syntactic sugar to direct the system to pick tools, but I can't. I just have to ask the question and hope the LLM kind of picks the right tools. But it would be really nice if I could just do, like an @ symbol and say, use this tool, because I already know that that's the best tool for the job. So there's a lot of like UX, I think, maturity that this space needs. Like chat is really great, but chat can be a little like, it can kind of block out power users, right? Like if I already know what I want to do, I should be able to direct it rather than let chat just kind of flow and hope for the best.
Yeah, that's actually really interesting. But I wanted to go back to your point about on designing like a good tools in your MCP server. Is it here, let me just lift everything from my API and generate the exact tools in the MCP server? Like what are the gotchas that you think like this actually doesn't translate? Like pagination is actually one that I've heard where it's like pagination actually does not translate very well from API to the MCP world. But maybe what are some other areas where you actually think this is not a lift and pull from your existing API into MCP tool land?
Yeah, I think pagination is a really good one. APIs which are not pure CRUD really struggle, I find. I also find that the ones that do exceptionally well are the ones with search endpoints. So like HubSpot has a generic search endpoint, which means whenever the LLM can't figure out what tool to use, search is a fallback, right? And then to search, it figures out what data is there. So that's really interesting because most products don't have like a generic query search endpoint. That's actually only, I think, common in like CRMs and that kind of tooling. So yeah, I also think a lot of APIs don't have good error responses built in. And so when the LLM fails to get the right response, they don't always necessarily try with the right data, or, if it's a network error versus a client-side error, like those kind of things are not disambiguated in a lot of APIs, especially older ones. For us at Speakeasy, this is really exciting because this means like the thing that we've always known to be important is even more important, which is your API spec. Like your API spec needs to be a highly curated quality document that you put time into. And then if you do that, your MCP servers, your SDKs, your tool, whatever it is you're building, are going to have all that right information. So that's the thing that I would like a lot of companies we talk to ask, like, how can they get ready for this wave of tools that are about to arrive? I think investing in like a great API spec, whether that's an open API spec, GraphQL spec, gRPC, like kind of whatever protocol you're using, making sure it's accurate, well documented. And this often is more of like an organization or process problem internally, like who's creating the API versus who's updating the docs. If you can solve that problem, I think you're actually in a pretty good space to take advantage of all the stuff coming up.
One thing I've been thinking about, if I don't specify a tool within Cursor or Windsurf, it is actually picking a default. So it'll pick like Firebase or whatever as the backend.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It'll pick XYZ.
Yeah.
And I wonder, like, there is one world where there's actually an SEO kind of play there. There's another world in which the same way that Google pays to be the default search engine in iPhones, like Supabase pays to be, I will actually be the default backend for new apps. I guess, how do you think about that? Like, what kind of advice do you give folks, developers, when they're trying to get their products higher up on that like preference list, which feels like this imaginary preference list?
Yeah, it's even more black box than SEO, like Google SEO, isn't it? Like it's clear. We actually just went through this exercise for our website, and I think at some point we'll have to for the Speakeasy MCP server. I think before getting into like technical details, I do agree that like there's an app store problem about to emerge here of like preferences, monopoly of search. I feel like we're gonna have like that. Was it Epic Games that had the fight with Apple about not prioritize placement, right? I think we're going to have the same thing here eventually. But to be really tactical, what I found as a founder is there's actually a couple like key things you can invest in for your product. Very similar to like sitemaps back in the day. LLMs.txt, like your website should have it. If you go to our website and go /LLMs.txt, that has like massively improved our LLM performance because LLMs are clearly doing web search tool calls kind of on demand. And then the second thing is making sure that your static content on your site is LLM optimized. We went through all of our documentation, made sure it's MDX, it's all statically generated. And there's a lot of interesting things you can do where like if you have like code components, a lot of people use fun custom components they don't actually work that well with us. Like things that require interaction to expose data on your doc site are going to be hidden. So instead, if you can build it out as complete static MDX rather than React components, the LLM will actually render that stuff inline in the search results. So there's lots of tweaking. I think like LLM SEO is about to become a job probably at a lot of companies. So yeah, there's tactical things you can do in the way your content is surfaced. If you're an API company, I would highly recommend like hosting an MCP server on your GitHub, just like you do your SDK, like a TypeScript SDK, a Python SDK. Just have a repo called MCP server, build an MCP server, put it in there, have people use it. Company like Speakeasy can help you generate one if you don't have the time to build it out yourself. Yeah, I think those are good places to start.
Yeah. And what do you think of is the future of MCP? I think like the way this plays out is there's going to be a verified marketplace of here are verified MCP servers, and this is like Google's official one, etc. And it's like either managed by Anthropic or it's managed by some non-profit foundation. I guess like where do you think this ends up going from here?
I do think that MCP servers themselves they should be producer owned, not consumer owned. So like if you want to use Shopify's MCP server, it should be the one Shopify officially distributes, versus like a consumer based one. I also think that MCP servers will be more of an implementation detail, eventually. What I want from Shopify is like a agentic endpoint, right? I want an API endpoint, shopify.com/MCP or agent tool, and then I can use that for function calling and the agents I build and any apps I build. I don't really care that it's MCP in itself. So the way we've been building our product is everything is MCP. Every agentic tool that we generate can be exposed as MCP, but internally, actually, we don't build MCP servers because there's actually more efficient ways to represent that information once you understand what it's doing. And I also don't think users should need to run an MCP server locally. Like that's also kind of a point in time problem of MCP being a local only protocol. So I think a lot of this is going to evolve into much the way that producers today provide tooling to their custom developer customers, like a doc site or SDK. This is going to be something that companies provide as an official toolkit. And I think discovering that toolkit is going to get easier than just searching on GitHub. It'll be searched through your IDE, right? It'll be like just-in-time completion in your IDE. So that's really exciting. And I think it's a huge opportunity for, API, not only API companies, but like really especially developer companies to differentiate the offering by saying they provide this agent toolkit out of the box.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I tried to install a couple and it's like super clunky right now to install an MCP.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy. There are some tools like the Smitheries of the world. I guess like where do you think those go? Or is there long term like they kind of get subsumed by this verified marketplace?
Yeah, I do think they will get subsumed. I think that the truth is like Anthropic is about to launch its registry, which will be like the official kind of like the NPM, right? Or the PyPI of the MCP servers. That doesn't mean there won't exist forks and third-party versions of servers, right? I think that like any open ecosystem, people will fork and clone and like make non-official versions, but there will need to be a way for like a user day zero to say, I want the official version. I think Anthropic's registry is probably the solution there. So I do think there's a place in the world for companies like Smithery and other products, but it's more, I think, it gives the ability for third parties to like experiment and tweak these things as opposed to becoming the source of truth. So yeah, I think just like today, people have official APIs, but there's still API marketplaces. There are unified API products. There are catalogs that like provide a kind of bundled up access of several APIs, but that doesn't mean you can't go use the official API too.
Yep. Yeah. I think another question I get actually often is A to A versus MCP. Like, how does the world evolve from that perspective? Or do they both have a place? How are they used maybe in conjunction with each other? Or do you have an opinion?
Yeah, to be honest, we've been so deep in MCP and other agentic tools. I actually haven't done my due diligence on like A2A thoroughly. It is at the end of the day protocol, so I do believe like there will be others, but um, I think the MCP definitely has some advantages in being a first mover, a more open protocol. I think it was also a big win for them to hear OpenAI adopting MCP. Like that's obviously a big win for Anthropic. So yeah, we'll have to see how Google kind of evolves with A2A. I suspect too that at the end of the day, there will be multiple protocols. There'll just be more popular ones and less popular ones. I think MCP clearly solves a need around. I think MCP is very much designed for like human access, right? So it's about helping people interface with APIs. I think if you're just talking about agents, I don't think an agent necessarily needs an MCP server. It just needs an agentic tool. The tool can be much thinner or lighter wrapper than an MCP is. So yeah, I think that there was a clear vision with MCP being like how I think actually humans interface with, or how humans direct an LLM to make tool calls.
That's actually a really interesting way to think about it. I hadn't necessarily like thought about MCP that way, but I think you're right. That is kind of like what it gives you over and above the like an API or a traditional API.
Yeah.
I guess like when I first saw MCP, I was actually like, this is such a weird setup. Like, why is it a server and a client? And
Yeah.
I was actually really shocked how quickly it got adoption because it did feel like over the last like 3 months, the entire industry has centered around it. With OpenAI also announcing support for it, as you mentioned. So it's just like kind of interesting. I think when I first looked at it, I was like, wow, like this is a very model centric view of the world, aka it assumes that the model will be able to do everything and you just need to provide it context. But I think the original reason to do the server client was actually to support statefulness. I think that was the real reason. And then since then they now do they support stateless as well. And so maybe like I don't know, I'd actually love your opinion on this, like whether or not the server was like kind of an interesting architectural decision.
It definitely was. I think the thinking was there would be enough state that needs to live outside the LM, outside an agent. I think we're finding now that actually, and it's supported by the fact that MCP has switched from pure HTTP streaming as the preferred protocol, and therefore I do think it's starting to look more and more like a client, like a pure client. And the server piece of this is more of a legacy artifact of how it was designed. I also think that part of it feels like the fact that it was designed so it could run locally means like that design helped people get started, right? Like you just run the server. Without the server, there's no way to actually get this going locally. So the server is almost like a local host story. It's not the hosted version of it could be anything, right? It could just be a custom server someone builds using the MCP protocol. So yeah, I agree with you. I think it's time to look more and more like a thin client. I'm excited to share that we are separate of that are helping companies launch MCP servers. So if you are a company working on MCP today and you are figuring out like how to curate a really high quality server that actually works, that's something we launched support for recently and we can help you do. All you need to get started is an API spec. That's all you need.
Cool. Okay. And then fun question for you. Curious, what are the MCP servers you're actually using? It sounds like the HubSpot one is a winner.
Yeah, the HubSpot one is a winner. I use one internally for our own admin API at Speakeasy, which has like all our customer data and stuff, which is amazing. It feels a little bit like a retool killer. I don't have to go look at a health dashboard. I can just get that info. I've been using one for Slack, of course. My top use case with the Slack MCP is I scrape channels for interesting convos and I ask it to turn it into a social post on LinkedIn. So I did it myself. Those are probably my top one. The last one is GitHub. GitHub's a tough one. The API is like really big and spread, so it doesn't necessarily work well. But getting information in all those GitHub repos we manage is also pretty interesting. So those are my top ones today.
That's great. And you use them through Claude desktop, I guess.
Cursor and Claude, yeah. Those are the top places I use them. Yeah, and I'm starting to use them through our new tools platform. So that's exciting, and I'd love to do a follow-up and do a demo for you as soon as that launches.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I found one that I like on Cursor that's like browser tools. That one is actually kind of helpful if you're trying to debug something and you can get all of the console logs from Chrome. I forgot who made that, but it's actually, that one's quite useful. I looked at a couple other ones that were like, it would hook up to your Google and all of that, but it got a little bit sketchy because I was like, I don't know if I want to give you access to all of my like Gmail credentials. This is why we need the verified marketplace.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I completely agree. There's like a missing story on verified servers, auth. Yeah, this is definitely not like it doesn't feel production ready yet.
Yeah. And how do you advise people when they try to do auth or authentication?
Well, the good news is MCP right now is like a transparent pass-through of your API auths. If you have like OAuth is obviously the best. I think if you do OAuth for your API, that is, you can set scopes on the API calls itself. So the people using it, just because they're using MCP server, they're not going to be able to, cut through the API auth that you have. So that would be my recommendation. And I think that's actually a huge area of opportunity. Something we're going after is trying to help people who use tools have managed authentication. And the moment you have managed auth, you have RBAC, you have auth, you have auth-Z. Like that's the opportunity here. Yeah.
I haven't looked at the project recently, but I know like a couple, maybe like even as recently as like a month ago, people were really concerned about security vulnerabilities within auth. Do you feel most of those are closed because it's able to now ride the OAuth rails, or how do you advise clients on that?
Yeah, I think it's not a solved problem. I think what I'm talking about is only solving if someone's trying to use your MCP server and they're already a user of your API. I think Anthropic has said also they think that we should have OAuth 2.1 for the MCP protocol more broadly, which should be interesting because that will mean there'll be a concept of scopes on tools, which will be interesting. Like you can imagine the HubSpot tool that we use internally. I don't think everyone, maybe myself included, because I'm not on the sales team, should be able to mutate a deal size, right? Like that's kind of a dangerous thing. You do it by accident, you've messed up your pipeline.
Yep.
So yeah, I think if there was OAuth 2.1 on scopes, I think that would make a lot of sense.
Cool. Amazing. I guess like any other last thoughts about MCP or the future of MCP?
I think, yeah, a lot of the disruption is coming on the consumer side. It's like how people use APIs. Funnily enough, how people build APIs is like still the same set of problems, maybe more exaggerated because you're going to have more users to agents. But the real opportunity feels like on the consumer side. You have, thanks to MCP, you're going to have agentic commerce, agentic, all kinds of stuff, right? And so, yeah, I'm excited to see it play out. I'd love to see the quality bar on this go up so that tool calls are more reliable. Like when you call a company's API, you know it works. It will do the thing. But now with MCP, like it's kind of like I don't know if my MCP is going to work most of the time, which is kind of curtailing usage to mostly query or discovery use cases. No one wants to take real action with MCP yet. So that feels like the Rubicon we have to cross.
Yeah, the consumer use case is actually fascinating to me. I feel like I'm waiting for Stripe is actually getting pretty close to this, but like I'm waiting for the launch of like here is a single use like transaction authorization, aka it has maybe like it texts me to make sure that I'm actually okay with the final dollar amount, and then it actually allows the agent to make a transaction. I don't know if we're quite there yet, but I think it's interesting that Stripe's been doing a lot, maybe going back to your like .xyz, URL endpoint, maybe there actually ends up being like a singularity that happens between like AI agents and everything that was happening in the DeFi world. Like you actually end up having those transactions logged on a ledger, which would also solve your problem related to like, how do I know if it actually went through or failed? So like, I can't believe I'm saying this, but like maybe crypto will actually be useful.
Yeah.
And like there's a world in which like that singularity happens, which would actually be like really, really, really interesting and very exciting.
That'd be hilarious. Yeah. That'd be like, yeah, crypto turns out to be the way agents do commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
Cool.
yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
No, I was just gonna say maybe crypto will have its moment the way GPUs did with AI.
Yep.
We haven't found the real big use case yet.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think Stripe has actually been making moves. They like acquired one of the crypto asset pretty recently, right? Like a DeFi brokerage or something.
They did actually. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so the singularity is nigh. Cool. Well, Sagar, thank you so much for joining me. How do people find you if they are interested in using Speakeasy for API or SDK or MCP generation?
Yeah, I'm at Sagar at speakeasy.com. I'm also on Twitter, X, Sagar_Batchu. That's spelled Batchu. Yeah, come chat with us. We also have an active Slack where I'm pretty active in our community. If you're thinking about doing anything with MCP or agentic tools or trying to use this for your own company, that's where we can help.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Sagar.
Thank you.